Our core essence is what makes us uniquely us. Our guest today is on a mission to help all of us discover what your true essence is. Join us. Welcome back to another episode of the Get Overit podcast. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Fasano. Before we begin, just want to remind you the easiest way to get these new episodes is to subscribe on your favorite player or YouTube if you're watching this. If you're really enjoying the show, we would appreciate if you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review, and tell us why you love the show. So now on to our guest for today's episode. Our guest for today's episode is Lauren Tatro. I've gotten to know her through our professional relationship here at Overit. In my short time knowing Lauren, she's a really excellent human. She's going to talk to us about a lot of the things she has going on. She is a very busy woman. She is a mother of 2. She's a wife. She's a marketing executive, but that's not all that Lauren does. She also is a certified intuitive life coach, which I'm going to talk to her about how she got into that, what it means. She also is the founder, and she created Discover Essenza, which is an Italian word, and I'm going to ask her why she chose an Italian word, because people don't just choose Italian things, I think. And she's also an author who wrote a book, Truth Be Told, which I think will be coming out soon. She's going to tell us a little bit about that. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, that was good. I remembered a lot of those things, and I found out Lauren pronounces her name Tatro, and I was saying it wrong all along, so this is good. It could clarified some things. So there are a lot of things I want to talk about, but I always ask the guests to start by introducing yourself. So why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, where you're from, how those just a basic introduction to yourself, and then we can start talking about your journey to where you are now.
Absolutely. Well, you did a wonderful job with the introduction
Thank
thus
you.
far,
Thank
but
you.
I am a Capital Region born and raised gal.
Okay, so you're
yes,
here. Okay.
Yes, I grew up in Skodak,
Okay.
so borderline farm country, but
Okay.
close enough to still
Okay.
get groceries. I enjoyed that. We moved around a lot, but all within, 5 miles of each other.
Okay.
So switched schools a lot, but stayed local. I
Okay.
went to Sage College of Albany.
So college here as
Yeah,
well?
yeah.
Okay.
I studied graphic design and business administration.
All right.
And then started, working as soon as I could. I've always been working.
Did you desire to leave the area, or were you totally content being here, in the area?
I was pretty content.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I had interest to travel, but I'm kind of a homebody, and I like
nothing to be like, I got to
knowing.
get out of here.
Yeah,
I want to leave.
no urge.
Okay.
The city, for a fleeting moment, I'm like, oh, I want to go to New York City because there's good design schools. But I'm like, I would not survive. I don't like the city that much.
It's now, you said design. Were you into design? What were your
Yes.
hobbies or passions when you were before getting into your career? What did you really enjoy?
Yeah, so growing up, I loved art and specifically pencil drawing. I was really into drawing. My mom is a fine artist. My grandmother was.
Okay.
So it's always been there, and
So art in your family a bit.
very much so.
Okay.
So I stuck with it, and then I started to get into that space of what do I want to do with this? Though?
Right.
Where do I
Right.
want to? And that's where I started exploring graphic design.
Okay.
So I started with graphic design.
Okay.
And then after 2 years, I was like, again, do I really want a 4-year degree in this? Do I want to be a graphic designer forever? Or is that just a tool that I want kind of in my
Is
toolkit?
that what you did when you went to college? Is that where you
Yeah.
started in, was graphic design?
Yes,
Okay, and
yes.
your degree? What is your
I
degree?
have an associate's in graphic design.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
And now I know I've met you through as a marketing professional. You're in the marketing world. How did that come about, right? I mean, how did it switch to that? I mean, there are elements to that, obviously, in marketing. There's
Yes.
graphic design and branding and things like that. Is that how that evolved?
Yeah, after about 2 years, I got into business and I started
Okay.
taking business courses.
Okay.
And my passion, as I quickly started to develop, was really about connecting people
Yep.
with the right messages,
Yep.
evoking feeling from those messages.
Yep.
So marketing was always something that was just kind of like a buzzword, like everybody wants to
exactly.
do it,
Right.
but you don't really know
It's
what
much
you're getting
more
into.
than that, right?
Yeah,
Right.
very, very much so. So I felt that combining the business with the design kind of landed me in that space naturally.
Okay.
And I really, really enjoy it because it's really, there's so many dimensions to
There's so
marketing.
many dimensions to that. People ask me a lot, you're a neuroscientist. How the hell, what? I don't understand why. What's marketing? And I'm like, marketing is not. It's just a word. All the goal as marketers is to craft and to bring someone to something, and ultimately we're trying to get you to do something. And to me, if that isn't neuroscience, then I don't know what is.
Right.
Because understanding how people think and understanding what's going on is at the basis of that, and it's the same thing in marketing.
Yes.
Talk to me a little about the genesis of your career, and then where did you start your career? And then I want to talk about your sort of this life coach idea because I'm really passionate about mental health. I really believe in, as a scientist, it's bizarre because I made a sort of a pivot in my life where I was it has to be true. Everything has to be fact-based. And then I had this sort of spiritual situation happen and it sort of took me in a road. So I'm wondering if it's the same thing for you. Okay,
Very
so
much
before we get to that, tell me a little bit about, so what was your first foray in your career? Where did you start?
Yeah, so I've always worked. I got my first start at a state park, and I was just interacting with people doing ticket sales.
Okay.
And slowly started to learn the office and accounts receivable and accounting, and I was like, all right. I just wanted to really try a whole bunch of different stuff because I didn't really know what industry I wanted to land in. But I did kind of get my first real job, I would say, in commercial real estate.
Okay.
I was there for a little over a year and a half. I was kind of in an executive assistant role, but I was also doing a lot of the marketing packages for tenants and prospects and aerial maps and all of that.
So that started to put that together a little bit. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the side, I was always doing graphic design.
Okay. So you didn't let that go. That was always okay.
No, but I didn't really put it on display. It was the kind of thing like my friends or people that were looking to start their own businesses, or I was doing promotional flyers for concerts and club nights and all of these things at the time that were part of my life.
That's fun.
Yeah. So I loved that. I really, really enjoyed that. But my whole goal through all of that was just to really just stay curious and figure out what I wanted to do.
Okay.
Commercial real estate wasn't quite it for me. And I really wanted to make sure that I felt connected to what I was doing. I took some time off. I left that job for a variety of reasons. But when I took a pause, I was unemployed for 6 months.
Okay.
And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out
what
who
it
am
is.
I?
Right.
What am I? The great surrender.
That's very what's the word? That's unusual, I feel, right? People don't do that. They don't take that time and really go in a bit. Is that who you are as a person, or is it just a time in your life where you felt like you needed to?
I was faced with an ethical decision.
Okay.
And I chose my values.
Okay.
So it was not a planned exit.
Okay.
I was just kind of okay, I guess I'm leaving.
Okay.
And terrifying.
Okay.
Terrifying. So I didn't realize how much I needed that. When I look back, I wouldn't change any of it.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
And how much I needed to stay focused on what was going on inside.
Yep.
So that just kind of led to, putting my hands up and saying, show me the way. Whatever this is,
wherever it goes,
wherever I'm supposed to go,
Yep.
I trust this and I'm willing to stay focused. I did therapy during that time.
Yep.
I really focused in on who am I? Why am I here?
Okay.
That curiosity has never really left me.
Yep.
It's just kind of evolved and taken different outlets.
And then
throughout the
that
path.
took you to what was next for you?
Next, I went on to work for Time Warner Cable.
Okay.
And I worked there for 4 years. I loved that job.
Okay.
Really, that was my marketing role, my first marketing role. When
All
I
right.
landed that, I was like, this is it. I made it.
You found it.
I
All
got
right,
the
great.
marketing
Cool.
job.
Nice.
Loved it.
Okay.
Loved it,
Cool.
yes.
Awesome. And then is that where you end up where you are today? I mean, after Time Warner Cable or no? Okay.
Yes,
All right.
I took a job with Capcom.
Okay, and that's where and that's how I met Lauren through that relationship. So I want to now understand. So you have this career path. You try. You're in one thing, like you said. Some things happen. I always say things happen sometimes, and whether you want it or not, sometimes you get forced out, and you have to then. When I look back on those things, and I'm like, you know what? I would have never left that place, or I might have languished there forever. And sometimes you just find yourself and you're on this and you have this really great path, but that doesn't really, from what I know, that doesn't really stop you from continuing to develop this passion that you have of looking inward and now helping others look inward. So I want to understand a little bit where that came from. So talk to me about how you sort of got on that path.
Yes. Okay. So for my 30th birthday, my mom and I took a spiritual retreat to Italy. And it was with somebody that I know and adore. Her name's Deborah Hanlon, and she's an intuitive psychic.
Wait a second. Time out. I just got the chills.
Yeah?
Deb is oh my God, this is so weird. I know Deborah Hanlon.
Mm-hmm.
Deborah Hanlon had a tremendous impact on my life. This is very weird.
Yeah. I'm goosebumps now, too.
I have the chills now talking about this. And wow. So I'm trying to figure out how. So my wife, I'm not trying to take away from this story, but I think it's related. My wife, her mom suddenly passed about, now 6 years ago, and she was 52. She was very young. And right after that, we went to go see Deborah. And at the same time, too, I was still in science, but very uncertain. And this woman, I had these weird experiences at the time, and this woman, never in my life have I experienced something like this with her. And I'm like, the guy from Lost who is like, you can't, it's all fact-based.
Yeah, the total skeptic. Which is her favorite,
She told me things that it was first of all, impossible for her to ever know. And secondly, she told me at the time what I was doing was wrong. And she said to me, like, wherever you are right now, you think it was, when you entered into that, it was right for you. It hasn't been right for you for a long time. And you are going to go into the world of marketing. She said this. I have the recording. And she said, like, whatever that means, you're going to go into that and you're going to be so much more successful and happy in that regard. And if you don't go into that, like, it's a problem. And you're going to email me when you do. And you're going to be like, wow, you were right. And I remember sending her the email. And the fact that she made me think about that. And it brought me to where I am today. And now I'm sitting with you, and you're telling me a story that got you on a journey, and she was involved. So that is some weird, wacky stuff. Okay, so I want everyone to put that as so you're okay. So now you go to Italy, and she's there. So this is a retreat organized by her.
Yes. So I had a reading with her. I brought my mom for a reading. She wanted to connect with her parents who have passed, and I love Deb. From the second we connected, she's just a realist. And it was funny. The first thing she said to me when we started talking, she's like, do you do logos? And spoiler alert, I actually just did her logo. When I look at like how things kind of unfolded, so I connected with her, and that's where I got really curious about energy work and into intuitive development, because I felt disconnected from like, who am I? What do I want? Why am I have no boundaries anywhere in my life, and I'm in dysfunctional situations, and I'm the common denominator.
Right.
So that was kind of the awakening, right? Is like, okay, I'm just going to absorb as much of this as I can. And when she posted the Italy retreat, I sent a note to my mom. I'm like, Mom,
we got to do this.
This is it. Like, we're totally doing this. And we did. And it was like the equivalent of the most intense, amazing experience. It was like an intensive, a week-long intensive.
Wow.
All day long, workshop sessions, meditations.
Where in Italy, by the way, was it?
We were in Umbria.
Okay, yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and we had some day trips planned. We went to Rome, and we were staying at this private villa. I mean, I was like, am I dreaming?
Wow.
This is like...
So you got to it's not only the experience of the actual workshops, but Italy has such a pace, or like I don't know, like there's something about it that is like lends itself to that sort of discovery.
And my Nana, my mom's mom, was born in Sicily, so we have family out there that we haven't really explored yet. But so I've always been drawn to want to go, and my mom was like, "Yeah." So that's where I would say that's kind of when it's like cutting open a tree and you see like the rings, right? That was one of the rings. That was a defining moment in my life that really allowed me to start tapping into my intuition and really get out of my head and into my heart a bit, because you just can get lost up there. And really
and when you play the game that is professional life and career life and as a parent and all of that, yourself goes by the wayside. It's just classic, right? So it's very, and I've learned that too, like it's very important that you find out, and you got to continue to find out. So you go there, you have this, you come back, and now you want to continue to do this and look at it. Okay.
Yes. So during one of my meditations, I kind of had a vision for what is now my logo for Essenza. And I just jotted down the image. And at that time, I didn't even know it was Essenza. During one of my meditations, deep meditations, I kept coming back to the word essence. And that I had found my essence. Like I had discovered the thing that's not in my head, that's not like who I am. And I'm like, I need to look this up in Italian because I'm in Italy. Like, this is it. This is the word.
So that's why the Italian. Okay.
Totally.
Yes.
I
was going to say, I got to ask her about that because it's not random. It can't be random.
So discovering your essence became kind of what I wanted to not only continue doing for myself, but to help other people that might feel stuck between their head and heart and not knowing how to still be authentic and true to themselves through so many demands, because it's ridiculous. The base of it is ridiculous.
And people will say, what do you find when people say this to you, or you've heard this, where it's like, I don't have time is the biggest thing I hear. Like, it's not feasible for me, or like, I don't get it. Like, like I got all this stuff. There's not enough time. And I'm going to take an hour out of my day to what you guys call meditate or whatever. I think meditation scares people.
Very much
I think that and I think I talked to Deb about this once. It's not what people think.
Nope.
So how do you sort of convey, what is your message to someone who feels like, because everybody feels like that. I'm sure you do still, and I do as well, but what is it that you say?
My primary question is, how's that working out for you?
Right.
That's where I go. And when I got into life coaching and learned, like, there's different gradients to coaching. I'm a high gradient coach, which means I'm going to be direct. I'm going to say it with, empathy, but I'm probably going to say the thing that you don't want to hear, but that you need to hear. And so if nothing changes, nothing changes, right? That's the saying. And the reality is, if you're not willing to take a look at the variables at how you got to where you're at right now, some people, and this is part of, during coaching and as I went through my certification and I started taking on clients, I'm not for every client and every client isn't for me.
Right.
And so some of that comes down to like coachability. Where are you at in your life? Are you curious to unlock some of these doors?
Right.
If you're not curious and you're just waiting for something prescriptive, then you're not going to get out of it the transformation that you're seeking.
You have to be open to that.
Very much so.
This was something I talked about with Deb too, and because I always was saying, like, she would say, in terms of these mediums, right? She's like, anybody can do this, but you have to be open to it. And that's the difference. It's not so much that like, she's like, I don't find myself to, because when you meet this woman, she's not like this. Like, if you have a stereotype of these mediums who like talk to ghosts in quotes, this is not this person.
Nope. That's why I love her.
She's just like a regular
she's a
human,
real chick,
normal human. And like, but she's like, I'm no different. It's just that when I'm at the grocery store and I'm online, and I'm there, I know that this person in front of me, she had someone pass and they were, because I'm open to the energy. And if you allow yourself to be open to the energy, it's very scary because all that energy will hit you.
Very much
and so. Like, I love so let's talk a little bit about energy, because this is something that I'm super into. I really do believe that energy is everywhere.
Yes.
And I can feel energy in people.
Yep.
And it's like to my downfall sometimes. I'm too tuned into people's energies and I'm like, nah, I don't know about that. So did you always I feel like I've always had that. Did you always have this feeling of recognizing energies?
I didn't realize that I did until I started learning more about energy and really empathic abilities, which we're all wired for. Like you mentioned, it's just a matter of being open to it. How I came to it was the hard way, was trying to figure out why I was so anxious all the damn time, right? And how do I manage this constant flow of somebody's bad mood throwing me so off kilter and internalizing it so much? I'm absorbing so many different energies around me. And where I really honed that was in the working world, right? Because there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. And you're surrounded, at the time in rooms of people. Yeah. Right? So
at the time, right?
It's right.
When we did that.
Exactly. It's this constant give and receive. And so is marketing in a lot of ways, right? So I just had to start to learn energy protection and knowing when I needed to say, okay, I'm only going to let certain things in right now. I need to not give away my energy on a platter, because people are just hungry for it. They see the light and they see that energy in somebody else. Right. And it's really easy to fall victim to, like, for me, I came from very chaotic environments, right, when I was younger. So I almost became addicted.
So you were like wired to that
wired
sort of chaos,
to it. Right? As much as it was discomfortable or uncomfortable, it was very comfortable at the same time. Right. I had to learn over time that, like, peace is not the same as loneliness, and this drama that was being created, I had a piece in it. So the curiosity is what kind of got me into that state of really understanding energy and the energy centers in our body, and all of that exchange that's happening, all of that nonverbal communication is happening all the time, is directly tied to intuition. And you can feel that in your body, right? And those are some of the things that when I put the word intuitive before life coaching, it's more so like I can tell if somebody is BSing.
Right.
And you can feel it. And also when someone has a breakthrough, same thing like we had, I'll get goosebumps down one side of my body. So there's like resonance that happens. And that resonance to me is kind of the indicator on where somebody's at and whether or not there's a block going on somewhere.
And I've always said that too. Again, maybe sometimes to detriment, but I've always had that ability where I'm like, no. You know what I mean? Yep. But I would also then say, and I remember when I talking to my therapist, who I have for the longest time, is saying, like, I don't want to do that either. I also don't want to be so dismissive of energy, because let's just say, for example, you are BSing me and you are telling me a whole bunch of lies. I don't want to discount you as a person, because I don't know what you're going through that has made you feel like you have to BS me right now. Because what I want to say to you is, like, hey, dude, it's all good. You don't have to give me that bunch of crap. I don't care.
Yeah.
Just talk to me like a regular. I'd rather get to know you as a person.
Yeah.
So there was a time for me where I was sort of using this ability as a way to be like almost too good, right? And like that's the opposite
Slippery
of
slope.
what I wanted to do with that ability.
Yeah.
Where, and again, I talked to Deb about this, like, I don't want to be dismissive of you because I feel like you're BSing me.
Yeah.
I want you to stop BSing me and having a regular conversation. But if I'm going to come across like, why would you want to then let your guard down?
Yeah.
So how does one do that? How do we become more open to others, even if we feel like, you know, there's something there or it's not really for us? Or do we just make the decision to move from there?
There's a couple things. First and foremost, for myself, I was that. So when I see it in other people,
you were that person.
Very much so. Very much so. And so I understand it. I understand. And now the circumstances that get us there are all different. But it allowed me to look at that as not an indicator of judgment, but to switch into the state of observation and say, that's where the curiosity comes in.
Right.
Not judgment.
Yeah.
This isn't
Right.
good or bad.
Right, correct.
But it is the degree of which the work we need to do.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
that helps me kind of calibrate a little. Okay. When working with somebody, some people might need a full year of coaching. Other people, 3 months with a couple refreshers.
And it's not just like it's going to be like,
no, it's
right.
it's an evolution. And so I think part of that is recognizing when I go to a place of judgment in my head and I'm in my head too much is where I have to come down and go to observation for myself too, because I'll catch myself in judgments on myself all day long.
Yes.
I'm like, that ain't helping anything.
Yep.
Same with the exchange with other people, because what you're actually dealing with is somebody's core fear. Right. And what they're showing you is a projection of that. Yeah.
Right. And I remember I had this friend in graduate school who was very, very into spirituality. And I had this moment with him. This sort of pushed me to another path where, you know, I was in grad school, I was stressed out. And I was young. And I was like, you know, I thought I was, you know, here I was in a PhD program for neuroscience and all this stuff. And I was blah, blah, blah. And I remember I was always to be very judgmental, again, dismissing people of things. And I remember there was this one experience I had where there was this professor, and he was always like sort of like rude, at least I thought, to me. And I remember being in the elevator with him, and I said something to him, and he sort of dismissed me and walked away. And I said to my buddy, and I said, you know what? I'm done with him. I try to be whatever, and he's always whatever, and I can't. Like, who the hell does he think he is?
Right.
And my buddy said to me, you know, did you know that he just lost his son to like about a couple years ago? Again, I'm getting like these like weird chills.
Left
and I'm
side.
like, he's like, do you know that he lost his son a couple years ago to like a tragic whatever? And I remember being like, I remember my feeling there and being like, oh my God, what an a-hole I am. I cannot believe. And I said, I didn't know that. And he's like, right, you don't know that. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
You think you know. You see someone,
Yep.
and it's all about you,
Yep.
how they're acting to you. But do you know the suffering that man, can you imagine what that man is going through every single day of his life? Not only does he have to live with that, he has to interact with young people.
Yep.
His job is to be around young people. He doesn't have his child anymore. And like getting emotional, like thinking about it. But like, that was like an awakening for me. Because I said to myself, like, I cannot do that. I can't do, because it's not fair.
Absolutely.
Because if someone judged me based off of something like that, it would be terrible. So you have to be, but it takes a lot. That's a mindset.
Oh, yeah.
It takes a lot. And like you said, I'm sure for you still work on this. I catch myself doing it too.
Yep.
So is that something that like you have conversations with people about, like, this isn't going to be like, oh yeah, Chris, you're good now.
Yeah.
Right? It's a constant
It's
work,
the
right?
most important work you'll ever do.
Right.
And the ego can be tricky that way, because it convinces us that we are this title or we are this thing and we have it all figured out.
Right.
But whenever you see that, and whenever I see that in other people, to me it's a measure of their pain.
Right.
Right. And so that's where I had to shift myself when I see it. And alternatively, when I'm projecting something at somebody, and literally over time, because it happens every once in a while where I'm like, okay, I'll stop in the middle and be like, this isn't at all what I'm trying to get across.
Right, I got to bring this back a little bit.
So vulnerability comes into play big time.
Right.
And I think people, that word gets thrown around a lot, but staying curious to figure out why you're showing up the way that you are and why you are receiving people the way you are is a vulnerable exchange.
Correct.
And the easy route is to place a judgment on somebody and say, boop, no,
Yes.
that's too uncomfortable for
Yes.
me.
Yep.
Instead of saying, what's going on in their world?
Yep.
And why is this triggering something in me that's making me feel like anybody has the ability to say or act like I'm not who I am.
Yep.
Right.
I know. And it requires a patience.
Very much
and,
so.
it's one of my things, like for me, one of the best practices for me is my home relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I want to talk to you about, as a mom, I want to talk to you about that in a second, but like practicing amongst relationship with my wife and my son, because those are people you're around all of the time.
yeah.
My wife is the complete opposite of me as a human by
Same.
design, I'm sure. But that also brings with it its challenges, because I progress and I withdraw in different ways.
Very much
And I
so.
can't expect her to progress and do things. She went through this terrible tragedy. And by the nature of marriage, you're up and you're down together.
Yep.
And so then I suffered along with that. And I wanted her to progress at a rate faster than I thought she was progressing at. But she wasn't ready to progress.
Yeah.
And so that was a challenge for me. But
Yeah.
through that experience together, we've emerged better out of it, because I had to learn, it's that my son, watching him grow, he's our only child.
Yeah.
Watching him develop into someone with emotion and how to sort of, the best practice for me, I mean, it sounds like that, not like it's not like an experiment, but you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
the best practice for me on that ability is that at home. So talk to me about like with your kids.
Yeah.
Are you going to try to make them aware, or try to impart some of this to them as they grow? I'm curious to know about that.
So I have two kids. My daughter Mia is 9. She'll
Okay.
be 10 in January. And my son Gabriel, he's 3.5.
Okay.
Two different dads.
Okay.
And my daughter is this. In fact, when I got pregnant with my daughter, that really set me on this path of intuitive development. She is an extremely intuitive child. She sees spirit, has connected with spirit, and I'm like,
Wow.
I've got
That's
Deb Hamlin.
impressive.
I'm like, whoa, do you have like kids classes,
what is
right? I'm
going
like, I'm
on?
not sure. How do I hold space for her to explore this without projecting any kind of fear on the
Right,
situation?
right.
And also just understanding that where she's going to go, I believe is already mapped out for
Right.
her.
She's going to go. Right.
Yes. So my biggest thing, and this is, parenting for me is still the hardest thing ever, because
Yep.
there is no, as soon as you think you have something
Right, there's
figured
not-
out,
right.
forget about
Yep.
it. And then, my son, my husband is ex-military. He worked for the Army for 10 years, he was pilot, all these things. He
Yep.
doesn't understand anxiety.
Right.
He is very here
whatever.
and now.
Yep. Yes.
Which that's a superpower sometimes, right? I'm like,
Right.
man, I wish I could,
You're
I
like,
lean
how are you
on that.
doing that?
I'm like, you've compartmentalized maybe a little bit too much
Yeah.
here, but I am the other end of that spectrum.
Yep.
So where I'm wide open and feeling my way through all of these things, he helps bring me back to reality sometimes a little bit and get grounded and
Yep.
say, like, let's really look at the threat here.
Right. Right.
Are you
Threat
creating
analysis.
that?
Right.
Exactly. And I'm
Yep.
like, 100% I am. So he really helps balance that. And my son is just a wide open cave boy. Like, he is just like full throttle. I'm waiting for him to love his mother. He loves me, but
No, I know you
my
mean.
girl
Yeah,
is like my
right.
love bug, and
Right.
she still is. She
Right.
still loves to
And
cuddle.
you're like, hello, boy.
And I'm like, give me a kiss. And
Right.
I feel like he feels my neediness, which was, it's something that even, my husband, like early on, would be like, play it cool. Like,
Right.
play it cool. Because he's just an even keel
Yep.
guy. And my son is just, it'll be interesting to see how he develops.
Yep.
He's extremely smart.
Yep.
And like sees patterns, and his mind is very, very sharp. And then my daughter is an artist and free flowing. So in any given time,
Right. You have. Yeah.
you pull from each end of that spectrum, and in some ways, I love that, because one day you can be over here, and the other day you can be over here, but still creating a sense of stability for them to just be who they are,
Yep.
without any type of hang up or expectation on outcome. And that's been one of the biggest lessons in that be patient kind of vein, right? Is if you get really hung up on outcome, then you're kind of losing yourself, not in a good way, in how you get there. And when you get there, you're never going to feel like you got there.
Right, exactly.
And the clock starts over and you're chasing something else and you miss the journey. And
that's the and that's the whole key.
That's the key. My husband says to me, we have kind of this inner joke, which is in my book, that he says, don't forget to chew your food. And that's always my reminder of like when you're scarfing down life and you're in pursuit of the next thing and you could feel that drive is great. It's wonderful. And it served me well in a lot of ways. But it also, like you mentioned earlier, is the recipe for burnout, for losing yourself, for not understanding what motivates you and why.
And then what is it for?
Exactly.
Right? What is it for?
Yes.
I'm like, you grind out, you get there, you're making money, you have these things. And you can't physically and mentally be there.
Not at all.
And like, a lot of people, I feel like people hear this, they're like, here we go again. Like, everyone, but it's true.
It is.
Ask anybody that grinds out. Like at a point, you have to say to yourself, wait a second. Take stock and like bring it back to like my son, like in coming home, like I will find, especially through this pandemic, for him, for everyone, it was very isolated and very, very, and like,
the ultimate test.
You forget that those kids, your kids, how you're behaving, how you're acting, what you say, how you say it, they pick up on all of that.
All of it.
And you're influencing their behaviors.
Yep.
Because they don't know, especially when you live and you're isolated like how we are. And I would forget that sometimes. And I would be so like picky on him because, you know, I have this idea. And sometimes my wife would remind me, you know, or once he did to me, he said, Dad, like, you know, I feel like you're being very whatever, hard on me or being whatever with me. And like, I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm sorry, I have been. And I feel like a kid or your kids can be a good reminder sometimes of like,
they're a mirror.
I've had a weird way of my life, right? And I've failed and I've won and I failed and I've won and I've looked, but like I have an opportunity now. This is my opportunity to not set somebody in the right way, but be supportive and be, my only thing I really try to do really is create a situation where there's openness. Where if they're feeling a certain way, we can talk about it. No matter how bad it is or what it is. Because my parents were, you know, they were that, but they were still some old school. It was like rule by, you know. There are boundaries, like with your husband, things are strict. Like, but this is a place where we can all talk about how we feel. And that's in the end, if that happens, I'm okay with that, right? Like that's that. I want to talk about your book before we end. So tell me, did you always want to write something?
No.
Okay.
No. In fact, like I never considered myself a writer.
Okay.
And over time, it was just like I had all of these deep feelings and thoughts, and I'm like, where do I put these? Like I got to a point where, you know, unless I was actively coaching with somebody or mentoring, and a lot of people now, you know, I don't have the capacity to take private clients currently, so I just do a lot of mentoring, and I kind of weave this into my everyday working life. I started to feel like I needed more of an outlet, so I started Discover Ascen's a blog first, and actually coming up 1 year on that at the end of this month, and I started. It was funny because every once in a while, I'd say probably 2 or 3 times in the history of my life, it would pop in my head or my spirit, whatever, saying, you're going to write a book. And it would that's kind of the intuitive piece of like, it would show up as a fact. And I'm like, nah. Like, you can't run from me. Like, nah. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Right. Like that just became, and then over time, I'm like, yeah, I think I am.
Have to write this book.
I'm going to have to write this book. And I am somebody that, you know, there's obviously a lot out there on law of attraction and goal setting and all these things. When I put something out there as a fact, like I have the mindset of, well, I wrote a book, I just need to write it. Right? Like, it's
exactly.
a done deal. I just need to write it.
You already have
and
the
at
book.
the same time, not putting myself in a container to say like it has to be done by this date, because the nature of this book is deep, but it's also, I like to blend like the deep intuitive side with logic, because I kind of meet somewhere in the middle where I feel that struggle on a daily basis. And for me, this book is really breaking down kind of the phases of transformation, right? And some of those moments, I call them moments of truth in the book, that were kind of seeded in me along the way and then evolved. So it's very much equal parts my story, but more so focusing on the reader and exploration. It's like if I could put all of my coaching skills into a book that somebody could just pick up and maybe they don't want to sign up for coaching yet.
Yep.
This is their guide.
This is their guide.
This is their way to dig deep and to explore. And so I'm about halfway done with it, but it's one of those things where things kind of come into my life, and art's the same way, where I'll have a period of time where I'm not doing any art. And then I feel the calling.
Right, and then you come to it.
And I'm like, all right, I'm back.
Which is which is a process for I hear a lot of authors that write that it's like, you go and then it's like, So like tactically, can I ask you, so like, do you have, because people might say like, I like you said, like I have something to write, but I don't know how the heck to structure it. Did you start by are you just typing? Are you outlining? Like what's your logistical tactics to writing?
I started, I did a lot of hashtag, research on Google, but really focused in on, okay, how do I want to frame the book? And so it's a 4-part book.
Okay.
And because I started going to space, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all these chapters, right? And I'm like, this is a lot of chapters.
Right.
I'm like, but there's kind of overlap in them. So I chunked it up into a framework of 4 parts. And just about done with part 2. And it's really, each of the parts is like a different phase of transformation. So it's the kind of thing where who isn't ever going through some phase of transformation?
But this is from your,
much so.
This is about you.
I write. So it's, the first part is about myself, the journey that I went through, the history in that, to kind of create that baseline of understanding that this isn't just some like flip a switch and you wake up magically better.
Right.
This, there's a lot of pain there.
Right.
And working through that and putting that into words also helps me process, right? So fine-tuning that, reworking that, and then getting into the stage of, okay, now it's time to talk about you, right? And here's the question.
Right, so like humanizing, like this is my pain.
Like who is Lauren and why should I,
Right, exactly. And like I'm not immune to any sort of pain, or everybody feels that way.
Very much so.
Are you scared, or were you scared to sort of put that out a little bit for people? You're in a professional world, and sometimes we feel like, like we gotta whatever, but like we're all real people. We all have things. So like, I don't know what's in the book, so I'm not to suggest like you have these like revelations, but I'm saying it's still bearing yourself as a human. Very much
so. Yeah.
How did that feel at first?
I feel like we're in this interesting, what I would call like paradigm shift between maybe the way companies were run or the way leadership styles were held up versus kind of this newer age energy that wants to show up as the human.
Right.
And so, of course, there's fear in that.
Right, of course.
But you know what? Anytime that fear shows up, that's my biggest indicator that I'm onto something.
Right, exactly. That's your whole thing,
yeah,
right? Like if you were to run from that, you would be completely contradicting everything.
And it would be chewing at me forever. So I've just, and certainly I feel that out. To me, like the coaching and the mentoring that I'm doing on a daily basis, and this encapsulates that. And if it's, something that, if I can help even one person in any way find that aha moment, and maybe they can't afford to go on a retreat to Italy, but, they still are curious to figure this out, then that's more closely tied to why I'm really here. Yep. The connection, the marketing tools, right? And all of the things that I've learned along the way are fantastic. And I still have a level of professionalism that I show up with, and my voice is very authentic in my writing. And I've just had to kind of get to a place of just being okay with being exactly who I am. And if that makes somebody else uncomfortable, we got to talk about it.
Right.
Let's talk about it.
The question is, why are you feeling uncomfortable?
Absolutely. And that has led to really good discussions.
Of course, it does.
Yeah.
You got to be comfortable in the discomfort. Like that's you have to be able to live in discomfort. I always say that, like when people say to me like I'm so uncomfortable, I'm like, that's okay.
Yeah,
it's
that's
all
a good sign.
That's great. So let's be uncomfortable together.
Yes.
And then if you're uncomfortable together, now you're comfortable.
Absolutely.
So like that's the way it rolls. But you have the willing parties have to be. They have to be able to get over that part. And I always say it's all like I do this with my son too. He gets anxious or he gets like, I'm nervous. And I'm like, that's totally fine. Let's talk it out. And then you talk it out. And then I'm like, you see, now you're comfortable.
Exactly.
Right? And he's like, oh, but I'm not there. But I'm like, but it's fine now, right? So if people want to go and check it out, the blog and things like that, where can they go?
LaurenTatro.com.
That's easy.
Yeah.
LaurenTatro.com. This has been a lot of fun for many reasons. I know you, but I don't know you. So this is great to get to know you.
I love it. That went so fast.
And I still have chills about
Kind of mind
Deb.
blown.
Like,
Yeah.
because everybody needs something at some point, I feel like. And she really was one who pushed me on. People are probably like, who is this woman?
Yeah. And she's going to be at the Omega Institute at the end of this month. My mom and I are going for a weekend retreat. Yeah, it's called Behind the Veil, and it's on Halloween weekend. So we're going to go for a couple nights. But yeah, she's wonderful.
Before we close, there was this. My wife. I'll just tell this quick story, and then we can close. My wife. Right after her mom died, she went up into her room at her house where her mom lived, and she. This was 2 weeks after her mom passed, and I was there. She came downstairs and she looked, like proverbial, like she saw a ghost. And I'm like, "Are you all right?" And she's like, "I swear I just saw my mom in the doorway in her nightgown." And I'm thinking to myself,
Ooh, total
I'm thinking to
goosebumps.
myself, like, okay, like she's going through a lot, like because this was still the pre-me, the pre-new me,
Yes,
and I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's okay. I'm like, maybe I'm sure you did, like maybe whatever. So we go. When I first experienced with Deb, we're sitting down, the two of us, and we're having these conversations, and she's bouncing back between me and her, and all of a sudden she stops and she looks at my wife and she goes, "Your mom wants me to tell you that was her in the doorway. That was her that you saw." I get the chills right now.
Head to
and my
toe.
wife has started hysterically crying.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, there is no way.
Yeah.
The only person in the world that knows that is me and her. You can't get that from Facebook.
Yep.
You can't get that anywhere.
Yep.
The level of detail there. And that opens me up. So I guess
Yeah.
where I'm closing with this is like, you have to be open.
Absolutely.
And you have to be willing to go there.
Yep.
So
Yep.
thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Appreciate
What an
it.
awesome conversation.
Thank you.